You say whatever you need.
Hello, Mr. Pez's class. Welcome back to the Tom Morris Show.
The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a labor law put in place in attempts to end segregation in public places. The act banned employment discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin.
The Civil Rights Act of 1964 is one of the most important laws ever passed in our country.
This act is considered one of the crowning legislative achievements of the civil rights movement.
It is often referred to as the most important U.S. law regarding civil rights since the Reconstruction era, which stretched from 1865 to 1877, and is a hallmark of the American civil rights movement.
This Civil Rights Act was signed into law by President Lyndon Johnson, who was the former President John F. Kennedy's successor, on July 2, 1964.
Fun fact: President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 with at least 75 pens. President John F. Kennedy proposed the initial Civil Rights Act, and he understood and recognized that people of color deserved the full equality they were demanding. Martin Luther King Jr. was a well-known civil rights leader and activist who had a great deal of influence on American society in the 1950s and 1960s.
In August of 1963, Martin Luther King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech, in which he basically shared with Americans his vision of an America where people would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. 4 little girls were murdered in Birmingham, Alabama, just before they were preparing for choir practice, all because their church was the staging place for many of Dr. Martin Luther King's marches. So the civil rights had been going on now since about 1954, and yet still Jim Crow laws were still all over the South. Black people were still treated as second-class citizens. So finally, in the wake of the bombing of these 4 little girls, Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, and the death of President John F. Kennedy, finally the nation said we...
Following the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, who had proposed the legislation, it was strongly advocated by his successor, Lyndon B. Johnson. The goals of this movement were freedom from discrimination, equal opportunity in employment, education and housing, the right to vote, and equal access to public facilities.
And gives African Americans equal protection under the law. So after a long filibuster by Southern Democrats to block this law, finally Lyndon Johnson was able to get it passed and signed into law, a law which outlawed all Jim Crow laws in our society. Thank you.